Police in Lakemoor, Illinois say they spotted a dark-colored SUV parked near an apartment complex.
There's Lakemoor officer Brianna Tedesco approaching that driver on a gravel road. Police say Kenneth Martell provided a false name.
At some point during the investigation, this individual produced a firearm.
On Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, in far northeast Pennsylvania, state police criminal investigators were called to the Meadville Police Department. There, they interviewed two potential witnesses to a crime that occurred in the city of Springboro just hours earlier. Springboro is a small town of about 400 people, about 100 miles north of Pittsburgh. The two witnesses were Connie Lynn Snyder and her boyfriend, John King, and they had a hell of a story to tell the cops. They said that Connie's son, 36-year-old Kenneth Martell, arrived at her home in the town of Cochranton late the previous night and began to assault both her and John. Snyder said that Kenneth had a pistol on him, and he held both her and her boyfriend at gunpoint and made them get into a vehicle to go to a home in Springboro. Connie and John complied with Kenneth's orders. During the drive to Springboro, Connie's son informed his two captives that they were on their way to the home of a dead man. Kenneth said that he had gone to the home earlier in the night to rob the man, but ended up taking the man's life. The trio arrived at the home and found the body in a bathtub. The cadaver was drenched in blood, bound to a rocking chair with electrical wire and duct tape, and was covered with a blue and white blanket. At Martell's direction, John King helped the deranged man in unwrapping the corpse, removing it from the chair and placing it on the floor. They left the deceased man on the floor and drove back to Connie's place and dropped John off. Then Kenneth and his mom rode over to the home of another acquaintance, a man named Harvey Hawkins. The armed man then forced Hawkins to hop in, and the three of them headed back to the Springboro home to dispose of the body. Police would later speak to Hawkins, who corroborated Connie's story, which was that when they reached the crime scene, Martell and Hawkins went inside the home, retrieved the victim's remains, and then placed it in the back of the victim's own vehicle. Then they drove to a pond about a mile away, where they removed it from the car. They then placed the corpse in the water. The victim was 88-year-old Theodore Garver. He died of sharp force wounds to the neck. In other words, his throat had been cut. He also suffered multiple blunt force injuries to his head and other trauma to various parts of his body, including abrasions caused by the wires and tape used to bind him. At around 11 a.m. Tuesday, just hours after Connie and John made contact with the police, investigators located and pulled Mr. Garver's body from the pond where it had been discarded. Multiple police agencies, including the state police, the Meadville Police Department, and the Crawford County Sheriff's Office, spent the day Tuesday searching for Martell, but were unsuccessful in locating him. 2 days later, and about 500 miles away, Officer Brianna Tedesco of the Lakemoor, Illinois Police Department was driving northbound on Four Seasons Boulevard when she spotted an SUV backed onto a gravel path with its lights off. It was 5 a.m. on Thursday. Officer Tedesco had been on since 11 p.m. Her shift would be ending in a couple of hours. Officer Tedesco pulled into the area facing the suspicious vehicle. She activated her squad lights and gave dispatch her location. Her dash and body cams were recording as she approached the vehicle. She observed a man reclined in the driver's seat. The man sat up, started his car, and let down the driver's side window when Tedesco shined a flashlight on him.
Hi. Good, how are you? What are you doing parked back here?
The officer engaged the man, who said he had been napping, that he was from Pennsylvania and that he was heading west. He gave his name as James Duncan. The man was in fact fugitive from justice, Kenneth Martell, and of course, Officer Tedesco was completely unaware of his true identity. The officer asked Mr. Martell for his driver's license.
Do you happen to have a driver's license on you?
He stated he didn't have one. The officer asked for any documentation that might have his name on it.
Do you have anything with your name on it?
Mr. Martell then looked around in his car and asked whether he had done something wrong.
Did I do something wrong?
No, but you're parked on private property right now?
Officer Tedesco assured him that she was simply checking on him because he was parked on private property. Mr. Martell spelled the fraudulent name he had given the officer and gave her a date of birth. Tedesco provided dispatch with this information. The officer advised Mr. Martell that she needed to ensure that he had no outstanding warrants.
Not a big deal. I just have to make sure, you don't have any warrants or anything.
Officer Tedesco then walked to the back of the car and wrote down the license plate number. Meanwhile, she was speaking to a fellow officer over the radio. She informed Officer Anthony Loicano of her precise location.
10-4, we're just after the townhouses. We're pulled off to the side.
Officer Loicano had been at the police station doing paperwork when he was called to provide cover for his colleague, Officer Tedesco. He got in his cruiser and headed out. He had only a general idea of Tedesco's whereabouts, so, as he was driving, he spoke with her via radio and requested more specific info on her location. This is when Tedesco replied back to him, letting him know where to find her as she was taking down the license plate number. As Loicano drove to the scene, he paid attention to the radio traffic between Tedesco and the dispatcher. He heard that the name and date of birth provided to his colleague had been run through the system and came back without a match.
8511, morning is all record for either Illinois or Pennsylvania.
Officer Loicano's alert was raised. This individual might be a wanted man and providing a false name. Loicano sped up a bit so as to get to the location more promptly. Tedesco told Mr. Martell that the name he gave her didn't match up with any driver's license issued in Pennsylvania. She asked him again for any documentation that would have his identity on it. Martell looked around the car again and turned the interior light on. Then he handed Tedesco a piece of paper, apparently in an effort to distract her. It was at this point that Kenneth Martell reached out of the window, pointing a handgun directly at the officer.
No!
Moments later, Officer Loicano pulled up behind Tedesco's squad car. His windows were down and he could hear the other officers' screams. He hopped out of his cruiser.
No! No, please don't shoot me! Please! Please! Please don't shoot me!
Officer Loicano fired one round into Kenneth Martell's face. Martell died at the scene. The coroner's office conducted an autopsy later, which indicated that the man had died of a single gunshot wound to the head, and that he had in his system at the time of his death intoxicants including amphetamine, methamphetamine, and THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. Authorities searched the woods nearby and found a large number of weapons, including rifles, shotguns, ammunition, and crossbows, as well as court and bail bond documentation and a criminal summons for Kenneth Martell. They also recovered stolen property and identification cards belonging to one Mr. Theodore Garver, the man found dead in Pennsylvania. When Brianna Tedesco realized that Kenneth Martell had drawn his pistol, and as she stared down the gun's barrel, she believed for a moment that the man had pulled the trigger. She said that when she first encountered the man, she knew immediately that something was wrong.
When he opened his eyes, I immediately knew this was going to be a bad encounter.
She said his eyes looked soulless.
He was soulless.
She was praised for her bravery in the days following the encounter. She received commendations from the department and letters of thanks from Lakemoor school children. However, she began suffering from PTSD almost immediately after the incident. She had been with the department for just over a year when the terrifying ordeal changed her life and deeply affected her career. After 6 weeks of leave, Tedesco returned to light duty at the police station. Soon she was forced to return to the street, but she wasn't the same. She began to feel that everywhere she went, there was someone waiting to kill her. On every traffic stop, she wondered if that day was her day to die.
Almost every traffic stop I made after that, I would pull aside and immediately start crying because I thought I was going to die.
A doctor told her that she wasn't ready to return to work. She asked her superiors for special accommodations. She asked to work a day shift with a partner. Her requests were denied.
I started out asking for a shorter shift accommodation. That was denied. I asked for a day shift accommodation as the shooting happened at night and I had struggles with the dark. That was denied.
Her bosses told her that if she got accommodations, the department would have to do the same for everyone. The anxiety she experienced after returning to street duty was compounded by the fact that fellow officers would sometimes not respond to her requests for backup. Finally, a year after the life-changing incident, Tedesco was given a letter saying she was being terminated. The department had determined that she was no longer able to perform the duties for which she was hired. The woman was stunned. In January of 2019, after a Freedom of Information Act request and a lengthy struggle over the release of the body and dash cam footage of the fatal confrontation, the video was made public and went viral. In October of 2022, a little over 3 years following her termination, Ms. Tedesco filed a federal lawsuit against the Lakemoor Police Department alleging unlawful termination. According to the lawsuit, the department and its chief failed to offer the time, training, and accommodations Tedesco needed to get back on the street. It said that the department fired her because she has PTSD. The lawsuit alleges discrimination and retaliation against the plaintiff on the part of the department. Former officer Brianna Tedesco is demanding to be reinstated and to be awarded back pay and damages. Her lawsuit is still pending. What's up, y'all? Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for tuning in once again. I've got new stories that I'm working on for you guys, so go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, like this video if you haven't already. And if you have any thoughts, leave a comment. Once again, thanks for tuning in. See you guys in the next one. Peace.